This is a guy on my team gambling on the sport in the competition that we're about to go out there and have. Something wrong with that. So that we have a quarterback like Brendan Sorsby who's fighting cases for betting against his own team.
Browns media has spent months hammering Shedeur Sanders, fifth-round pick, character issues. Can he even handle being a backup? Over and over, the same tired line. But while they were busy doing that, the actual character problem inside this quarterback room wasn't wearing number 12. It was Brendan Sorsby betting on games he was supposed to be playing in. And when Coach Prime finally said the quiet part out loud, it exposed exactly who the media should have been talking about this whole time. Let's start with what's actually been happening in Browns media rooms and on NFL insider timelines. Jeremy Fowler has made a habit of it. Every time his name comes up next to Shedeur Sanders, it's the same two things: fifth-round pick, character issues. Not stats, not tape, not anything Shedeur has actually done wrong on a football field. Just a draft slot from over a year ago and a vague word, character, that nobody ever bothers to explain. Here's the thing about that word. It gets thrown around like it's evidence, like saying it enough times makes it true. But go talk to the people who are actually in the building every day, the ones in meetings with him, the ones watching him work, and you get a completely different answer. That's not speculation. That's what happened with a former NFL player who came out and said flat out that he was wrong about Shedeur. Not a little wrong, fully, publicly, on the record wrong. And that matters because it takes something for a grown man with an NFL career behind him to say, I judged this kid off the field stuff that turned out to not be true. He said he had his hand up admitting it. He said everyone in that locker room sees a guy who's charismatic, sure, but also a professional who cares about winning. That's not a fifth-round pick with character issues. That's a guy your own locker room wants to play for. So if the actual football people, the ones with eyes on the practice field, are walking back the character talk, why is it still the go-to line for Browns media? Why does Fowler keep going back to it like nothing changed? That's the question nobody in that press box wants to answer. And it's not just the character label. Head coach Todd Monken has talked publicly about the quarterback race going back and forth day to day between Deshaun Watson and Shedeur. One practice it looks like Watson's job. The next practice it flips back to Shedeur. Insiders have taken that and spun it as instability, like nobody in that building knows what they're doing. But watch enough practices and a very different explanation shows up. Nobody has run away with the job yet because both guys keep making plays. That's not chaos. That's a real competitive battle, which is a good problem to have at quarterback, not a scandal. It gets a lot harder to keep pretending Shedeur is the problem once you put all of this next to what's actually sitting in that quarterback room right now. Because there is a real character story in Cleveland's quarterback competition. It's just not the one Browns media keeps writing about. There's also the Deshaun Watson piece of this that Browns media conveniently leaves out when they're busy doubting Shedeur. Watson is a fully guaranteed $230 million quarterback who missed all last season with 2 torn Achilles. He came into this offseason with every advantage: the bigger contract, the built-in trust from the front office, the benefit of the doubt that comes with being the guy they paid to be the franchise quarterback. And by multiple accounts, he led early in OTAs before tailing off, while Shedeur, a fifth-round rookie with a fraction of that resume, kept closing the gap. That's not a knock on Watson trying to come back from a brutal injury. It's a reminder that Shedeur has been doing this the hard way, every built-in advantage, and he's still in this competition. Meanwhile, the fifth-round pick and character issues line keeps getting recycled like none of that context exists.
We're starting out with former NFL star LeGarrette Blount just set the record straight about Shedeur Sanders should be the starter. We have seen enough from Deshaun Watson.
I am on the Shedeur train. I want to go with him. I think that he provides a spark to the offense. I think that he comes in and plays with a chip on his shoulder, knowing that he got drafted, where everyone thinks they know that he should have been a high draft pick. You know, you got Deshaun Watson, who's had opportunities to prove himself. He's had opportunity after opportunity and after opportunity to prove himself. And you got Shedeur, a young guy with a young offensive coordinator and a young head coach that got a little fire lit up under him from being a 5th-round draft pick, even though, hey, you made $17 million with jersey sales and all that stuff. Oh, hey, he's a great football player, and I think that you got to go with him, and you got to let him ride out with the new head coach and the new offensive coordinator.
But what you said, this is two in the same. Let's see if we can win right now, and then maybe that answers a question if this is one of the guys who can step in for the long term. A guy who I kind of wrote off at first, and this is me putting my hand up because of what I thought was off the field stuff, and he turns out from everyone in the locker room, he's a charismatic dude, yes.
Hold on, rewind that for a second. A guy who publicly doubted Shedeur just told everyone he was wrong. Now watch what the media does with that. While Jeremy Fowler keeps recycling 5th-round pick and character issues about Shedeur, the actual gambling scandal on this roster is belonging to Brendan Sorsby. Sorsby was found to have placed bets across multiple schools, including bets involving his own team. That's not a rumor. That's the situation that got him ruled out of this year entirely and forced into a supplemental draft petition that got rejected. He's not eligible to play again until 2027. But it didn't stop there. The Big 12 Conference actually filed a legal complaint in federal court against Texas Tech and the Texas Attorney General. According to Yahoo Sports insider Ross Dillinger, the filing is seeking a declaratory judgment and a preliminary injunction to enforce Big 12 bylaws and potentially sanction the school over plans to play Sorsby. League presidents and athletic directors reportedly asked Texas Tech directly not to play him. The school didn't agree. Now you've got a legal fight, with the conference considering monetary sanctions or even a ban from the conference championship game. One analyst broke down exactly what this comes down to. It's the Big 12 trying to protect its own ability to govern its conference, to actually enforce its own bylaws, because as things stand, they feel like that right has been stripped away by the courts already stepping in and overriding common sense. And this isn't some small technical dispute either. Opposing Sorsby playing was never really about one school beating another school. It's about the integrity of the sport itself. A player betting on games involving his own team, then fighting in the legal system for the right to keep playing anyway, while an entire conference has to go to federal court just to try to stop it. Now, put that next to what Fowler keeps saying about Shedeur, a 5th-round pick who, by every account from people actually in the building, works his tail off and has earned respect from teammates and coaches, versus a player at the center of an actual gambling scandal, serious enough to get an entire conference suing in federal court over it. If character issues is the label Browns media wants to keep using, they picked the wrong quarterback.
Nissan, part of the Tim Daly Auto Group, serving Utah since 1968. Jason just referenced it. The battle between Texas Tech and the Big 12 Conference as a whole continues. The conference striking back in a notable way earlier this morning. Ross Dellinger of Yahoo Sports, the first to report the following, and I quote his social media post. News. The Big 12 has filed a legal complaint in federal court, against Texas Tech and the Texas Attorney General, seeking declaratory judgment and a preliminary injunction to enforce its bylaws and potentially sanction the school for its plans to play Brendan Sorsby. Whoa, he continues, per the complaint. The Big 12 presidents and ADs have requested that Tech not play Sorsby, but the school has not agreed, resulting in league considering monetary sanctions and or ban on competing in the Big 12 championship game.
Here's a bold claim. If gambling on your own team while trying to keep playing isn't a character issue, the word doesn't mean anything anymore. It gets even more interesting once you hear how the Browns front office actually talked about the Sorsby situation. Browns GM Andrew Berry went on the air and was asked directly about it. His answer wasn't an outrage. It was grace. He said he asks two questions when something like this happens. Is this a bad person, or did they make a bad decision? And then, what are they doing about it afterward? He talked about needing to correct the behavior, about everybody screwing up at some point, about some mistakes being bigger than others. He said it's a good first step that Sorsby is getting help and that people deserve a little more grace. Now sit with that for a second. Grace. For a gambling scandal serious enough to trigger a federal lawsuit between a conference and a university? Meanwhile, Shedeur Sanders, who hasn't been connected to anything close to that, still gets fifth-round pick and character issues thrown at him on repeat, with zero specifics attached from the same media ecosystem that's extending grace in the other direction. And this is exactly where Coach Prime's comment lands so hard. Because while Barry was choosing careful, measured language about second chances, Coach Prime said the part that everybody watching this was already thinking. He pointed straight at the obvious problem. A guy on your own team gambling on the sport, in the competition you're about to go play in. Something is wrong with that. Not framed as a nuanced take, not softened, just stated plainly the way most football people actually feel about it away from the cameras. That's the split you're watching play out in real time. One front office voice trying to extend grace to a player who bet against his own team, one media narrative that refuses to extend an inch of grace to a player who by every internal account has done nothing but work and earn respect. And it's worth saying the grace argument itself isn't crazy on its own. People do deserve second chances, and getting help is a real first step. Nobody's arguing Sorsby should be run out of football forever. The problem is where that grace gets extended and where it doesn't. Extended to a gambling case, but not to a fifth-round pick who's done everything right since the day he walked into that building? That's the double standard. If Browns media wants to keep talking about character in that quarterback room, Coach Prime just handed them the actual story on a plate. They've just been pointing the camera at the wrong guy the entire time.
I really asked two questions. I asked, number one, is this a bad person or did they make a bad decision? And then the second piece is like, okay, what are they doing after the fact, whether it's to correct the behavior? Like, is this a pattern of decision making? And if so, have they done something to stop the pattern, or is this an isolated incident? Because the reality of it is, like, we're all going to screw up, and some certainly mistakes are greater in magnitude than others. You know, the most important thing, in Brendan's case is like what he does from here. Obviously, it's a great first step to get the help that he needs, but then it's like, okay, what is around him? What is he doing to make sure that like he can maintain healthy habits moving forward? And so it seems like it's a very good start there. Obviously, I don't know all the details at this point, within society, so to speak. I think we could all stand to use a little bit more grace.
Think about that for a second. The front office is out here talking grace for an actual gambling scandal, while a kid who's done nothing but work can't shake fifth-round pick and character issues. That's the part that should be blowing people's minds. So here's where it all comes together. You've got Shedeur Sanders, who by the account of a former NFL player who publicly reversed his own judgment, is a professional his locker room wants to build around. You've got Browns media, led by voices like Jeremy Fowler, still running the same fifth-round pick and character issues line with nothing new to back it up. And you've got the actual character story sitting right there in the same quarterback room the whole time. Brendan Sorsby tied to a gambling scandal serious enough that the Big 12 is suing in federal court to keep him off the field, and still fighting in the legal system for the right to keep playing. Add in Todd Monken publicly going back and forth on who's QB1 day-to-day, which insiders are quick to spin as instability when it's really just two competitive players pushing each other in an open battle. Add in Andrew Barry choosing grace and second chances as his language for the actual scandal. And then add in Coach Prime, cutting through all the careful media framing with one plain, blunt sentence. Something is wrong with a guy on your team gambling on the sport you're about to go play. That sentence is the whole story in one line. It's not really about Sorsby specifically at that point. It's about what gets called a character issue in this league and what doesn't. A kid who works, earns respect, and gets doubted anyway because of where he was drafted, versus a player at the center of an actual gambling scandal who gets grace. Coach Prime didn't need a press conference to make that point. He said it in one breath, and it lands harder than anything Browns media has written about Shedeur all offseason. If the standard for character issues is what Sorsby actually did, then Shedeur Sanders never should have been anywhere near that conversation. The media just kept saying it anyway. And there's a bigger point buried in all of this, one that goes beyond just Shedeur and Sorsby. The game has changed. With NIL money, sports betting everywhere, and fantasy football tied into everything, the culture around players and money looks nothing like it used to.
Players getting paid is a good thing, nobody's arguing against that. But when gambling gets close enough to touch the actual competition, close enough that a guy could be betting against the same locker room he suits up in, that's when it stops being a business story and becomes exactly what Coach Prime called it out for, a trust problem. And trust is supposed to be the one thing that word, character, is actually about.
Grace? Are we sitting here talking about grace? As Coach Prime stated, this is a guy on my team gambling on the sport in the competition that we're about to go out there and have. Something wrong with that. Somebody gambling on a sport they're playing, you don't think there's something wrong with that? Absolutely there's something wrong with that. We're blood, sweat, and tears out here on this football field, and I have my teammate gambling, betting that I'm going to lose this game, and you my dog, you my brother, you're next to me.
Reality check. Nobody in Browns media has said a single sentence about Shedeur this direct or this true. Coach Prime did it in one line. Let's lay it all out one more time. A former NFL player who doubted Shedeur Sanders publicly admitted he was wrong and said the locker room sees a professional who cares about winning. Jeremy Fowler and Browns media kept running fifth-round pick and character issues anyway, with no new specifics behind it. Meanwhile, Brendan Sorsby, tied to a gambling scandal across multiple schools, including bets on his own team, got the Big 12 Conference to file a federal lawsuit trying to keep him off the field, and got ruled out until 2027 after his supplemental draft petition got rejected. Browns GM Andrew Berry responded to that with grace and second chances, and Coach Prime cut through it with one blunt sentence about what's actually wrong in that picture. Put those pieces next to each other, and the media's whole character narrative around Shedeur falls apart. The guy with the actual off-field problem got the softer treatment. The guy who by every internal account has done nothing but earn respect keeps getting hit with a label that was never really about him in the first place. Add in the fact that Shedeur has been doing all of this while going head-to-head with a $230 million quarterback coming off two major injuries, closing the gap in that competition the hard way, with none of the built-in benefit of the doubt Watson walked in with. And add in that Monken calling this race close and competitive is being spun by some as instability when it's really just two players pushing each other. Every piece of this points the same direction. The character story in Cleveland was never about Shedeur Sanders. It just took Coach Prime saying it plainly for people to actually hear it. So here's the real question. Was Browns media ever actually talking about character, or were they just recycling a fifth-round pick label because it was easy? After everything Coach Prime just said about what's really wrong in that quarterback room, do you think Shedeur Sanders deserves an apology from the people who've been doubting him? Or do you think they just move on to the next storyline like nothing happened? Drop your answer in the comments, smash like and subscribe.